2-year journey for us, and we are ready to release our resilience plan. It's been a lot of work, and I want to first ask the Fab Five to step forward right quick. These are the 5 people who've worked very hard on this project, getting this plan in place. Who's missing? Somebody stuck in the back back there. And
Mark, would you grab is there a plan? Is one of them in there on the desk? I want y'all to see this.
these are the Fab Five that worked on this project, getting this plan together, and I can't thank them enough. Everyone in the agency contributed, but these were the people responsible for getting it done and done on time, Governor, because I think I said to you, if it wasn't done on time, that I was coming over to get fired. But I was going to fire some other people first. But it's done, and it was done before time also. So I want to say thank you to everyone that's here and all of our friends who supported us throughout the process. The South Carolina Office of Resilience began as a disaster recovery office back in 2015 to carry out the housing recovery program. And you can see the houses on the wall all around, 3,341 homes that we repaired or replaced. And that was the program that we started in 2015, 2016, and 2018. Following those back-to-back disasters, Governor McMaster recognized the need to be proactive and take a proactive approach to mitigation of disaster recovery and planning. So he was looking forward. The creation of the South Carolina Floodwater Commission was created in 2018 with Tom Mulliken leading that effort, Dr. Tom Mulliken. And in that, they made the recommendation that we create an Office of Resilience, an office to be a proactive office to help with flood mitigation and other disasters that may come along. The legislature mandated, once we were enacted into office in 2020, they asked us to put together a resilience plan. We had about a year to do it, but we asked for additional years, so we got 2 years to get that plan done, and the plan is completed and is ready to be introduced today. We're taking a system-wide approach to evaluating vulnerable flooding and hazard conditions in South Carolina. And this is a clear picture from this plan of how we will move forward. The 54 recommendations identified in the plan offer a first step in building a more resilient South Carolina. With this plan, citizens will be safer. We will have a better South Carolina and an understanding of where we are in our resilience efforts. The next phase of our planning process involves engagement with local communities in the watershed to develop localized projects and policies that do not simply move the problem from one area to another, but instead addresses the core problem, causes of flooding, and to provide a transformative solution for South Carolina. This is going to require us to grow our communities a little smarter than we have been in the past, building where we should not be building, and take a data analysis approach to all that we do. It requires a protection of our undeveloped lands and offers a natural protection for storms. It requires us to protect our tribal and traditional communities and cultural resources that make South Carolina the special place that it is to live and to visit. But perhaps most importantly, it requires cooperation from our businesses, our nonprofits, our communities, our governmental entities at all levels working together. And this is something we live and die by here in this agency. And Governor, we hear from you all the time. We have to do it by communicating, by collaborating, and cooperating together. So this is our plan that we're putting forth. And Tom Mulliken is going to speak next, and we're we'll go from there.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and what a remarkable day in history as we gather today to really witness Governor McMaster's plan come together. In 2018, when he formed the Floodwater Commission, he was leaning forward, and over the last several years, first engaging one of our great leaders, Ben Duncan, with his A-team putting together this plan. South Carolina has demonstrated a position of global leadership. Here in South Carolina, under the governor's leadership, we've been able to dispel that you have to choose between economic and environmental sustainability. What the governor has done is set forth a path, put together a team that's collaborated broadly to be able to protect our communities across the state. You see the homes, the families that have been impacted, and at the same time seeing surging economic development, economic innovation. So I'm pleased that I had an opportunity to work for the governor and continue to do what I can with the commission, to collaborate with Ben Duncan and his team. And this is a day that will be remembered for many years in history because we are watching the greatest conservation governor in the history of our great country. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Alex Butler. I'm the Resilience Planning Director. I'm here to break up the eloquent speeches. But first, I'd like to recognize Governor McMaster, the legislature, and Tom Mulliken of the Floodwater Commission for recognizing the need for there to be an Office of Resilience and for there to be a statewide resilience plan. I'd also like to thank the hundreds of people who collaborated in the development of this plan, several of whom are in the room today. It really was a collaborative effort from many partners across the state. And finally, I'd like to again recognize the planning staff, Hope Warren, Bradley Craig, Andrew White, Kirsten Lackstrom, and Fran Vera Kelly, who are truly dedicated to serving the citizens of South Carolina and have worked tirelessly on this effort. The South Carolina Office of Resilience defines resilience as the ability of communities, economies, and ecosystems within South Carolina to anticipate, absorb, recover, and thrive when they're presented with environmental change and natural hazards. This initial version of the plan focuses on flooding, but we do take a look at other hazards that impact the state, and we'll be developing further recommendations as we move along for those hazards. The implementation of the recommendations will increase our ability to anticipate the impacts of environmental change and natural hazards. It includes increasing the number of weather stations we have, the number of river gauges, tidal gauges, groundwater monitoring stations, as well as monitoring for land subsidence. In addition to collecting new data, the plan recommends better coordination of the state's data, so we're working smarter with the data we have. We have a series of recommendations in the plan to increase public awareness of the hazards we face. This includes increased education, outreach, and property disclosure, as well as the promotion of best management practices and tools and model local ordinances that can reduce our risk. The plan calls for the incorporation of best available data regarding land use, population, and climate, and incorporating that into planning, infrastructure design, and regulatory processes. Resilience must also be incorporated into our housing recovery programs so that South Carolinians can not just recover from disasters, but also thrive. This plan recognizes the need to remove regulatory barriers to the use of nature-based solutions and to the importance of conservation of undeveloped landscapes in protecting us from floodwaters and other hazards. It also recognizes the need for us to work with local communities, including our tribal and traditional communities, who can provide local knowledge and expertise to help us deal with these issues. In order to move these recommendations forward, as Chief Duncan mentioned, we will be coordinating future planning at the watershed level. That's set to begin later this summer. And it also requires us to work with our partners across state lines in North Carolina and Georgia. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Henry McMaster, Governor of the state of South Carolina.
Thank you very much. Well, as y'all can tell by just looking at this book, Mr. Duncan, Chief Duncan, how many people participated in this, you say?
Over 100
Well,
individuals
you can take
and organizations.
And how many pages?
744.
Okay. And Dr. Mulliken, the Floodwater Commission had how many people and how many pages and how many months?
We had 82 members of the commission and a 405-page report.
So you see, this is something that has been thoroughly digested and analyzed. And what we knew at the beginning was that our state has a lot of water. Our state has a cultural history going back to the beginning, a gorgeous, precious, unique environment. but a lot of water, and it's good to have a lot of water. There's some states that hardly have any. If you look at Lake Mead and some of those places, they're going dry out there. Well, that's not our problem. But we will have problems if we don't take the steps to learn exactly what water we have, where we have it, when we have it, how much of it there is, where it's going, why it's going where it's going, and all of those things. And if you look at these photographs of how many, over 3,000 homes that were damaged by the floods, you realize, you multiply that by the number of people that may live in those, or have lived in them, or still trying to live in them around our state, and you realize the magnitude of the problem just with flooding, and that's just in the homes that are destroyed or damaged, many of them beyond repair. So clearly we have a great place to learn how to control, measure, and manage our water and how to get the best use of it. There's an old saying that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Well, this report calls for a plan that measures virtually every possible aspect of water and its consequences, its availability, with Mr. Butler mentioned with sensors all over the state. We need to be able to have in our state that has so much water, so much beauty, all of which we depend on, we need to be able to know what to do to stop damage from occurring and how to respond to damage and threats when they do arise. So this is a great step forward for our state and our people and for our future. It not only will it make us safer, but it will open up avenues for study and inquiry and sophisticated experiments all across the state, add to our bank of knowledge about how nature works for us and how we can help nature. And one example in a flood, I don't remember which one it was, but it was flooding coming down the PD. Water was, as you know, in watersheds, and a lot of this work you'll see if you look at the report there, the watersheds extend beyond the state lines in places. So we get water from, as we did then, from North Carolina. I don't remember the name of that storm, but it parked up there for a couple of days. And there were just buckets of water coming. And not only were we dealing with the water that fell on us, but also that it fell on North Carolina. And as a result, we were facing some real problems. Well, up in Conway, where the water was coming, there'd been a lot of development. It's a beautiful place, but because of the development, the water really flooded. It didn't have anywhere to soak into. And we were experiencing projections of what would happen on farther down. And I remember the famous picture, I think it was the mayor of Georgetown was standing on Front Street with his hand up around his forehead somewhere as to the estimated height of the flood that was coming. Well, the flood never came. Why? Because the marsh was there, the woodlands were there, and the water was able to disperse and soak into the ground. And so they had a fairly dry day in Georgetown, fortunately. But that was something that we learned about water. So this is a great step forward, and as Ben mentioned, Chief Duncan, also this fits perfectly with our conservation efforts because of what I mentioned, how nature absorbs and directs the water, and it fits perfectly with our cultural mission to see that we protect our natural and cultural heritage, including the Gullah Geechee areas of our state, which are unique, and Queen Quet has testified at the United Nations on the importance of that. So all of those things fit together with this, and fortunately we've got a great team of people who know exactly what to do and how to do it and all of its ramifications. So once again, South Carolina, our South Carolina has taken a big step forward to make this confirm to all that this is the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. So we'd be glad to answer questions.
Governor, you were very successful this year, getting $200 million in the state budget for the Office of Resilience. Do you expect in the next year to be asking for more money in your executive budget, or do you think
Yes, ma'am.
$200 million fits?
No, well, we'll have to see, but I think that we will make a lot of progress with using those funds, and what we will attempt to do where we can is to leverage that money is matching funds with other perhaps private donations or other grants that we may be able to receive from federal sources or others. But this is a project that is not going to begin today and end in a year or so. This is something that will be a permanent part of life in South Carolina, and just one more thing that we know it makes us unique and makes us stronger people.
These are recommendations today. You've obviously secured funding. What are some of the priorities for implementation? What can people expect to see implemented first?
Yeah, we really rely back on our definition of resilience, and the first step is being able to anticipate. So I think prioritization of getting those new data collection efforts underway, as well as coordinating the state's data in a way that we can start to use some kind of advanced analytics that we haven't been able to use previously. And additionally, coordinating at the watershed level, really engaging our local communities that have local expertise and local knowledge that we just don't have at the state level that we need to get from our local communities. So we'll be working closely with them. Those would be the two kind of top priorities starting going forward.
And what does that cooperation mean more viscerally? Is that going to mean the formation of working groups or monthly meetings? Like what is it actually?
Yes, it'll be meetings. It'll be us going to where the people are. We want to make sure that we're engaging everybody and not just a few people who can make a meeting during the middle of a workday, but really trying to engage everybody who has a stake in what's happening in the community.
What are some of the data points that you mentioned, trying to collect data? What kind of data are you getting and trying to find all kinds together?
Yeah, so we need to collect, South Carolina, we need better data on kind of the foundational data that we use to do modeling, to do planning. So that includes weather stations, creating a network of weather stations across the state so we can monitor what's happening with our climate. It includes increasing the number of river gauges so we can better model how the water moves across the watersheds, monitoring our groundwater so we know what's happening with the superficial systems, trying to keep septic tanks from failing, looking at the tidal measurements, as well as looking at land subsidence. Yeah, every part of the state faces risk. Each part of the state has their own unique risk, and that's why it's important for us to work at the watershed level. The coast obviously has to deal with sea level rise, but we also have threats in the upstate. The I-85 corridor has a high risk of impacts from a large flooding event. We just haven't been tested like we have in other parts of the state. So the entire state has risk associated with it.
Are there any priorities in terms of, does any region take priority over the other as you all are starting to implement some of these recommendations?
No, I think this is a statewide effort. It needs to be a statewide effort. Water doesn't follow political boundaries, so what we're doing in the upstate helps us down lower in the state. What we're doing at the coast will help us statewide.
Can you give us maybe a hypothetical example? The governor mentioned the flooding a few years back, the Waccamaw River in Conway, with subdivisions, even downtown Conway underwater. What type of things can you do, hopefully, to mitigate? You can't stop the river from flooding. So what are you focused on to maybe mitigate severe situations like that?
Yeah, I think from the planning standpoint, what we're looking at is using the natural systems that exist, making sure we're protecting what's already there, trying to rehabilitate maybe what's been lost, as well as just keeping people out of harm's way. A lot of what we talk about in the plan has to do with local policies and planning and making sure we're putting people in the appropriate places. We want to make sure that when we're moving new citizens to South Carolina, we welcome them, but we want to make sure they're not putting themselves in harm's way.
Who got an example? You want to tell them about Nichols?
Yes, sir. We started off with the Floodwater Commission. What we found, Chip, is that we had years of flooding, and just about anything you could imagine flooding out of somebody's carport were in our rivers and our creeks and our culverts. So we have gone out on a monthly basis and cleaned those. So we start with trying to free the water so the water flows naturally from the mountains to the ocean. In Nichols, we had a cleanup that the governor led in the middle of the summer with other agency heads where we cleaned up, and we actually found that when the rivers and the creeks and the culverts were clean, the water continued to flow. And it was from that that we engaged communities that 2 Earth Days ago, we planted 3.4 million trees on one day, not just because it's aesthetically beautiful, but a mature tree absorbs 10,000 gallons of water annually. So when Alex talks about the natural systems, we're looking to first free the water so it flows naturally. And we use Sellers in Marion County as an example to go into to show people what their communities can do. And then we continue to build on these natural resiliency strategies, which is very different than some other places that are arguing over hardened. We started with, let's rebuild the natural systems.
And I also want to add that we've already started with our mitigation program. We have over 35 drainage projects that we've awarded grants for, and that's presently. We have over 20 plans and studies for cities and counties for them to try to understand their water problem, why they're flooding. So these things have already started, but it will continue on to a greater measure once the plan is in place.
I was going to ask you if you could go over kind of what happened in Calhoun County with their emergency management and SCORE last week as kind of an example. The surveys that you guys did with Calhoun County and had meetings down in Calhoun County last week.
That's with our mitigation program. They do have a flooding problem there. They have water issues there. And it was just trying to understand what the issues are and what we can do to help them mitigate those issues. Yeah. So we're doing that around the state. That's not just in Calhoun County. We're doing it around the state.
I was just for like an example of how it's already started.
Yes, that's correct. It's already started. Yes. Thank you.
Here's something I bet you didn't know. I didn't until he told me yesterday.
I was telling the governor yesterday about the issue of land subsidence along the coast. There's been some remote sensing data that's been released from the national level, at the national level, that appears to show that most of the coast of South Carolina is experiencing land subsidence. Land subsidence is the compaction of the sediment that leads to the land sinking. So we think about the sea levels rising, but we also have the land sinking. The problem that we have in South Carolina is that we're completely reliant on remote sensing data. We don't have any instrumentation in South Carolina to measure that kind of broad-scale land subsidence along the coast. So one of the recommendations in the plan is the installation of measuring equipment to measure that land subsidence along the coast.
Does the plan include any coastal development regulation?
It does include recommendations for local governments to reduce the number of folks moving into flood-prone areas.
For people who live in some of these areas that aren't the most prone to construction, and maybe have raised generations of their family there and aren't comfortable with moving, what has been your message to those families? Or have you found that families have been pretty receptive to uprooting and moving when they find out that they're in a flood-prone area?
Yeah, you start talking about buyouts of people in flood-prone areas. It's a very delicate topic, right? It's a very detailed topic you have to look at. There's a lot of things to consider. There's attachment to place. You know, some folks have lived in communities for generations, and there's a very strong attachment to place. So you have to work with the communities early on to let them know what you know and try to work to solutions that everybody can live with. Buyouts are voluntary. That's just to be clear. When we do have a buyout program that operates through our mitigation group. That's a voluntary buyout program. We don't force anybody to move. We're really trying to work with folks if that's the best option for them to help them with that process.
Will there be a statewide convening of planning officers at the county levels? Will you all bring them here to Columbia, Governor? Will you all convene so that they actually really know what's in our plan, so that the plan doesn't just sit on shelves or be a PDF on people's computers?
Go ahead, tell them about the watershed.
Yeah, so we will be working at the watershed level, bringing all those planners together. In addition, with the rollout of the plan, we'll be going and doing kind of a regional road show to try to get more localized outreach for the plan. Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you need aside from money, maybe what you all need the legislature to do in the future to help continue this program? And I think I may have seen one recommendation that asks for some kind of legislative action. So is there anything that specifically y'all need the legislature to do moving forward, aside from opening up the?
Yeah, a lot of the obviously, funding is key, but one of the legislative recommendations we do have in there is creating a legislation to protect our isolated wetlands, such as Carolina Bays, that offer natural flood protection. We currently don't have those kinds of flood protections in the state.
Like some counts, South Carolina is the second to last state on the eastern seaboard to adopt a resilience plan. Are we late to the party here, or are we behind, or is this putting on paper something you're already doing?
No, there's been a lot of good, the Resilience Office is a couple years old, but there have been a lot of agencies that have been working in this field for a long time. Sea Grant, DNR, DHEC, there's a lot of different state agencies that have been working in this field for a long time. Every state has gone about resilience a different way. Some have offices embedded in other agencies. We're in the governor's office. So every state's kind of taking this differently. I wouldn't say we're late to the party, but we certainly, there's no time to waste.
With the buyout plan, how do you guys assess what's a value of an area home? Is it one payout for everybody the same, or is it different for everybody who agrees to be a part of that program?
Yeah, that would depend on how the buyout program is set up and where the funding source comes from. So in the plan, what we recommend is for the state to look at establishing a pre-disaster buyout program. Currently, our buyout programs that operate are post-disaster. So it's federal money that comes into the state post-disaster. So what we're looking at is establishing of a pre-disaster program where we're being proactive. And that would really require engagement with the communities and making decisions about, how you want to operate a buyout program.
Do you all have a rough number of maybe how many homes are still in these areas that y'all plan to tackle in the coming future?
Yeah.
We have 6 programs that we have implemented, and a total of about 200 homes for those 6 programs. And they're different areas of the state.
200 homes each for each program?
No, just total of 200 homes, right. Specifically in Horry County, there are about 60 homes that we're targeting that they've repetitive flooding, one home more than 14 times. So those kinds of issues that we deal with.
And let me mention also this, we're looking forward to this, and the main goal is to manage the water, as Dr. Mulliken mentioned, around Nichols and in those areas where just some attention to systems that are already in existence but were not functioning because they'd been not cleaned out, ignored, not maintained. If we can do that, we can eliminate a lot of this flooding. And also through conservation efforts, there are a lot of conservation enthusiasts in South Carolina, and there are a lot of legal means for easements, conservation easements, and all those sorts of things. And we have a great state park system, and we're building that, making it better and stronger. There are a lot of ways to protect the land smartly to reduce the threat of these disasters, so we don't have to spend money repairing things.
Out of curiosity, are privately owned dams being looked at as part of this plan as well?
What's the answer to that?
I can answer. Yeah, private owned dams are regulated by DHEC. They have a dam safety program that's greatly increased its capacity over the last several years thanks to additional funding from the legislature. The plan does look at broadly at dams and the risk associated with dams, but those regulations on dams are managed by DHEC.
Two more questions, guys. All right.
Is there anything hurricane specific in the plan? What are the priorities for responding to the possibility of strengthening or more frequent hurricanes in the coast?
The plan mostly looks at the changes in rainfall intensity. Certainly, there's the possibility that we may start seeing more intense hurricanes, but we do have a climate chapter that we partnered with the University of South Carolina Sea Grant, and the South Carolina Climatology Office that's included in the plan that looks at kind of how the trends we're looking at for hurricanes and other hazards.
Any other questions? All good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.